there was a period in my life where it's like I didn't have a choice but for my sexuality to be shadow work. It's just like that's just what it was. And I can now choose to go into those places. Like I can have a lot of kinds of sexual experience now, and one kind will be kinky. Um, but usually if I go in there, it's like it's a choice. It doesn't choose me anymore. And I was
Mm.
just curious if you relate to that at all. Like if you're the how kinky you are depends on the life period you're in, or like the life chapter you're in. I'm just curious how you relate to that.
Yeah, I've had like chats with Sanya about this too, and with this kind of concept of us using kink as shadow work and stuff, and that
Mm-hmm.
both of us have found over time we've become less kinky,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because we've been recognizing the way that like we were using kink to meet unconscious needs, or to
Mm-hmm.
express unconscious elements of ourselves. And then the more that we explore those in kink, and the more that, because both of us do coaching, and so we do shadow work and,
Mm-hmm.
aspecting and all these kind of things
Mm-hmm.
also, then we started like seeing the links between stuff that was expressing through our
Mm-hmm.
BDSM dynamics and stuff that was other
Mm-hmm.
general life unconscious elements. So the more we started meeting these needs in our day-to-day life, the more that it stopped being like a compulsive need to play with kink.
Mm-hmm.
And that more now it's like something playful and something that yeah, to be like, oh, we haven't had a kink scene in a little while, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe we should have a little BDSM night. Or I found at the Sex Positive Festival the other day, like after working a lot and holding space a lot, then I was like, oh, and I got a little bit like relationally triggered at one point, and
Mm-hmm.
then I felt quite like activated, and I was like, oh yeah, I'd really like to get flogged right now. Like I feel like there's tension in
Mm-hmm.
my body, and that I'm like
Yeah.
holding on to a lot because I've been triggered, and now I'm like holding space, and just this feeling of like
Mm-hmm.
being a little too in control and wanting to
Yeah.
release and melt. And that I find flogging a really
Mm-hmm.
beautiful therapeutic tool for like releasing, kind of like a
Yeah.
catharsis practice. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, then had a beautiful flogging session, and I got to like kind of melt afterwards, and I felt like, yeah, I got to
Mm-hmm.
release that tension and release that pain and stuff like that. And yeah, in general, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there will be periods of my life where I'm like, wow, I'm making so many decisions, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
being such a businesswoman right now, and
Right.
doing all this stuff. And then I'll be like, yeah, I really want to get tied up, or I really want to have a
Mm-hmm.
session where I get to just be submissive and surrender to
Yeah.
counteract, and to
Right.
balance out that energy. So now it's definitely much more of an aware process of being like, oh, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
feel myself being drawn towards that. Or maybe first I'll just notice that like I feel like I'm excessively in control right now, and maybe kink would be a nice thing. Or maybe I get the impulse for
Mm-hmm.
kink first, and I'm like, oh, why is that? And it's really great because
Yeah.
then I can communicate, whether it's with my partner or someone else that I'm having a scene with. I can really communicate like
Mm-hmm.
what's the underlying need, or
Right.
what's the desire at the core of why I want this
Mm.
scene. And then it's easier for them to like help co-create that, and we can create it
Yeah.
together, so
Mm-hmm.
that I don't end up with this like unsatisfying experience where it's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they were, doing it wrong or in a way that I didn't like or something. Like if I can
Right.
communicate that, it's more likely to really get met.
Yeah, totally. Nice. Yeah. Thank you for that reflection. Yeah. Yeah, I relate with a lot of that in my own exploration. And I think the last thing you touched on, I think I'll say three things, but I think the last thing you touched on was a really astute point of like, if a person wants a scene, asking the question like what what scratches this, what itches this scratching, I think is a really useful one. Because some kink scenes I've also had, like sometimes for me getting flogged or receiving pain is actually helpful if I'm in just like a small painful life, if I'm like burnt out for say, and like getting flogged can like help me actually just like cathart all of the pain I'm feeling and just like reap, like squeeze it out of my system. But like that's a very different desire than like I have a lot of like desire, female dominant desires that are very very old, and for as far as I can tell, those are linked to like very deep stories around childhood trauma. And then I have other desires about like being in control and destroying someone, which it's just like each thing for me will touch on a very different part and a very different need and a very different like came up at a different time in my life too. But anyways, all that to say, I think that's really useful. And I think the last thing I got from that last bit you shared, well, this could be a whole nother conversation, but maybe we could save it for another time. But I've also found the wheel of consent to be just like such a, have you explored that at all? Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
But just
absolutely, I love it.
yeah, I just found it it just felt it continues to feel so revolutionary for me. Cause like even in what you were describing of like, well, even who is the scene for? Like whether I'm subbing or doming, like the scene could be for me or my partner or both of us or an exploration. But anyways, I just find like um yeah, those would be very useful questions to ask. Like, what do I want to get out of the scene and whose pleasure is the scene for? And I feel like those questions are so helpful in negotiating a scene because it's such a skill set to be able to create something with the person and talk about it beforehand, both put what you want, your desires and boundaries into the pot and like see where you go, see where you get. And obviously it's always an exploration and sometimes you don't get the scene you wanted and that's useful, just frankly, just as useful. But I guess I'm just appreciating some of the different things to look at that might come up in the negotiation of a scene.